In set after set, there are cards that Magic players systematically undervalue. These are cards that win a huge number of the draft and sealed games that they show up in, and yet people leave them until pick 6, pick 7, or pick 8. So if you identify the commonality of these cards, you can gain an edge in a new draft format. In draft, these are the cards where you will win more games if you start picking them just a little bit earlier. And in sealed, these are the cards that you might be tempted to leave on your sideboard, but you just should not. So with Secrets of Strixhaven right around the corner, I want to tell you my top 5 predictions based on 2 years of data that I gathered and analyzed for which cards I think are going to be the most undervalued. I collected 2 types of data going back to 2024, mainly using 17lanes.com. The first one is game in hand win rate. How likely are you to win a game after drawing this card? And the second one they call average last seen at. This is the average place in a pack where a card was last seen. So an alpha of 6 means the card was a 6th pick on average. I use game in hand win rate and alpha to build a measure of how underdrafted a card is by comparing a card's game in hand win rate to the average win rate of cards with a similar alpha. So the card in the top row has an alpha of 6. It's a 6th pick card on average, but it has a game in hand win rate of a whopping 60+%. 6 picks on average have maybe about a 55% game in hand win rate. So this card's win rate is outperforming its pick order by plus 5 percentage points. Then I dug through Strixhaven spoilers to find the cards that have similar characteristics to the cards that most outperform their pick order. The cards that look the most like systematically underdrafted cards. Now, predicting how good a card will be is hard enough, right? Let alone predicting how good it will be compared to how good people think it is. But such clear patterns emerge from my analysis of 2 years of data that I'm confident that seeing these 5 cards is going to give you an edge in pre-release and in the early days of the format. So let's see card number 5. This is one of the clearest cut cases of a card that I strongly expect to be underdrafted, Essence Scatter. We have seen Essence Scatter over and over and over again. We saw Essence Scatter in MTG Foundations. In that format, Essence Scatter in Foundations was a super underdrafted card. This card was winning like a 2nd pick card, but it was being treated like a 4th pick card. And that wasn't the only time we've seen Essence Scatter. In Dominaria United, Essence Scatter, this card was winning like a 2nd or 3rd pick and being treated like a 5th pick. In Ikoria, Essence Scatter, also underdrafted. In Pioneer, Essence Scatter, underdrafted. You get the point. However good you and the people around you think Essence Scatter is, it's probably a little bit better. And by the way, in this video, I'm focusing pretty much exclusively on commons, both because rares are harder to predict, but also because those are most of the cards that you're going to see in a draft or in a sealed pool. And in general, common level counters have been underdrafted in a lot of different formats. In Foundations, Refute was being treated as about a 7th pick, but it was winning like a 4th pick. It was being passed several picks beyond where it actually should have been picked up based on how often this card wins. Another super underdrafted card in a recent format, Ooze Spill from Ninja Turtles. This and Refute are both cancel variants, but when we're talking about common and uncommon level counters, we just see over and over again that they are underdrafted. Ooze Spill was almost criminally underdrafted, one of the most underdrafted cards in any recent format. Syncopate as well in Final Fantasy. This card was winning at the same rate as some bomb level rares that people were first picking, but it was going 4th, 5th, 6th pick. I would sometimes even wheel Syncopates, but the data clearly demonstrate it was going much later than it should have. I've been talking about Essence Scatter so far, but there is this uncommon counter in Strixhaven. For 2 and 2 blue, this spell costs 1 and a blue less to cast if it targets an instant or sorcery spell, counter target spell. This is a variation on the 2 mana common or uncommon counter that we've seen recently. In a lot of recent sets, this is counter unless they pay 2 and then sometimes counter unless they pay 4. But really you should think of it as a counter spell variant with more permissive mana that has a little bit of a catch, like it gets better under some circumstance. Here the circumstance is it's a lot better if it's targeting an instant or sorcery spell in a set where instants and sorceries are a really big deal. So I really don't know what to think of this card. Essence Scatter, I'm very confident it's going to be underdrafted. Brush Off, I'll walk you through my thinking. So in recent sets, Assimilate Essence, this is one of those 2 mana counter variants, a massively underdrafted card in March of Machines. Reasonable Doubt, one of the most underdrafted cards in Karlov Manor. Dispelling Exhale, this was massively underdrafted in Tarkir Dragonstorm. Each of these cards is one of the most underdrafted cards in its set. Divert Disaster 2 in Edge of Eternities, set after set after set, we see this 2-mana counter being underdrafted. Now, I don't know exactly how Brush Off is going to play out, to be honest. It is a little bit different from the style of 2-mana counter that I just showed a bunch of examples of. So we'll see. I'm going to put that as a question mark. Essence Scatter, I'm very confident it's going to be underdrafted. Number 4, another prediction that I'm quite confident in. Banishing Betrayal. 2 mana for an instant, return target non-land permanent to its owner's hand, surveil 1. We've seen this card before, actually. I'm not sure why they changed the name, something to do with the story, I guess. Unauthorized Exit, 1 and a blue, an instant, return target non-land permanent to its owner's hand, surveil 1. Identical card, right? This card was underdrafted, but not to an egregious extent. A card that was underdrafted to an egregious extent was Afara's Dispersal, which was often 1 mana for this kind of an effect, surveil 2, but a little bit more restricted in what it could bounce. I think those are the 2 most similar cards we've seen recently, and between those 2 both being underdrafted, I'm betting Banishing Betrayal will be as well. There's another one worth mentioning, though, which is Run Behind. We've seen this in pretty much every recent format. It is 4 mana for an instant, but this spell costs 1 less to cast if it targets an attacking creature, and I call this ability Super Bounce. Target creature's owner puts it on their choice of the top or the bottom of their library. We've seen variations on this card in pretty much every one of the last few sets. The 4 mana Super Bounce that sometimes gets a discount. I'm just gonna tell you, spoiler alert, it's pretty much always underdrafted. By my measure, about the second most underdrafted card of the last 2 years is Return to the Sewers. Especially because this gave you a little extra something. I think this one was extra good in a way that people weren't accounting for. But Deem Inferior was quite similar to Run Behind, pretty similar to Run Behind. It was underdrafted. Dire Downdraft, this one's like, it's almost exactly the same thing. I guess the main difference is for vigilance creatures that are attacking but not tapped. Hopefully that's mostly an edge case. It was super underdrafted in Bloomburrow. Lost in Space, underdrafted in Edge of Eternities. The difference is Run Behind gets you a discount. Lost in Space has an extra surveil attached, but we just saw having that extra surveil attached to the bounce spell made it really good. And in particular, made it underappreciated, concealed how good it was. The only example I could find in a recent set of the super bounce being appropriately drafted is Temporal Cleansing, which turned out to just not be very good in Lorwyn. So it would be an anomaly if Run Behind is not underdrafted. This type of card is pretty much always underappreciated, but it's not unheard of for it to turn out not to be that great. It's just very likely that it will be good and underappreciated. I also want to point out a bit of a through line, especially for Banishing Betrayal. Blue mana commons that just give you an extra something, a little bit of card selection, a little bit of card advantage. These tend to be underappreciated. So Lightshell Duo was an example in Bloomburrow, one of the most underdrafted cards in Bloomburrow, and it's because the body lined up well and the Surveil 2 was really good. Although I will caveat that with the same card was not that great in Foundations, but people do seem to tend to underappreciate the value of surveilling in common at blue, or in blue. One interesting thing to point out, though, is we do have Quick Study in this format. So this is another common upcoming in Strixhaven, 2 and a blue in instant, draw 2 cards. This is one of the many variations they've tried on the classic Divination. Divination is a beloved effect, 2 and a blue, sorcery, draw 2 cards, but it's just not good enough to keep up with modern Magic. So recently they've been trying out different ways of making this actually a competitive effect in Limited. Quick Study is a reprint. It was printed in Wilds of Eldraine, and in Wilds of Eldraine, it was not a very good card. It actually wasn't underdrafted at all. It was not very highly drafted and not very winning. So that's a really important data point for how good Quick Study is going to be. But if you just staple a little extra something onto Divination, it turns out to be really strong. Eyes of Gitaxias was one of the most underdrafted cards in March of Machines. And Pearl of Wisdom was one of the most underdrafted cards in Bloomburrow. And this was Divination with a discount, right? So my personal prediction is Banishing Betrayal will be good and underdrafted. Run Behind will be good and underdrafted. Quick Study probably will not be good, and people will see that it's not very good. That's what I'm guessing. Number 3, a Johnny's Response. This is a variation on what is now quickly becoming a classic that is always underdrafted. So this is 4 and a white for an instant. It costs 3 less to cast if it targets a tapped creature. destroy target creature. So we've seen very similar cards recently, Ride's End being the most notorious one. This card was amazing in Aether Drift. 4 and a white, an instant, costs 3 less to cast if it targets a tapped permanent. Exile target creature vehicle. Vehicles are a really big thing in that format, so it makes sense that it included these extra stipulations on permanent, vehicle, etc. The thing that made this card so good, though, is various interactions that it had in the format. I don't know if that's going to happen in a Johnny's Response, but I actually think it will, because mana value 5 or greater is a thing in this format. And the thing that made Ride's End famous is you could pair it with Up the Beanstalk in standard, and it just absolutely went off and triggered a million things and was amazing. So I think a Johnny's Response is going to be underappreciated. I think it'll have the same synergies, and this effect just, I think, is good in a vacuum. Here's another data point on that. Luminous Rebuke, 2 mana, essentially, if it targets a tap creature, destroy target creature. This was really good and really underdrafted in Foundations. I think this card plays on a psychological trick. It's, in many cases that matter, a 2 mana destroy target creature for white, but it looks like it costs 5 mana. I'm old enough to remember when this came for 4 mana on a sorcery. Runic Shot for 1 mana as a sorcery, destroy target tap creature was not good in DMU, and in Outlaws of Thunder Junction, same story, 2 mana destroy target tap creature in white was not good as a sorcery. So I think it's crucial that this card is an instant, and it has this 5 mana value thing going on where you get the benefits of having mana value 5, but it only costs you 2. And I also think 2 mana destroy target creature in white is just really good right now. For example, Slash of Light, massively underdrafted card in Final Fantasy, because the way that it worked out, it was often just 2 mana destroy target creature at instant speed. And I think that's going to be the same thing for a Johnny's Response. And I think in white, that's not just good, it's good in a way that people are not recognizing. So prioritize a Johnny's Response a little bit more than you think you should. I think you'll get an advantage from that. There is another card that I want to note here, Rapier Wit. Tap target creature. If it's on your turn, put a stun counter on it, draw a card. And this is 1 and a white for an instant. I'm really curious about this card. I think it could be Slash of Light-ish if the format's really fast. 1 stun counter is nowhere near destroy target creature. But if it's a really fast format and there's a really fast white deck, you know, Rapier Wit could be good. So right now I'm thinking Rapier Wit is not going to be underdrafted, but it could surprise me. A Johnny's Vengeance, I'm confident it's going to be underdrafted. I'm not very confident about anything, but I'm confident it will be underdrafted. Okay, most underdrafted card number 2. Often this ends up being some kind of colorless fixing. I've put in Spectacle Summon here as an example of this common dual land cycle that we have in Secrets of Strixhaven. I'm not specifically claiming that blue-red is going to be the underdrafted one. I want this to stand in for there's going to be a land, a dual land, that is underdrafted. And that's a combination of 2 things. First of all, I'm not making predictions about what color pair is going to be best in the format. Other people, like Limited Resources, are going to do their 3-hour card-by-card review, which, by the way, I'm going to listen to right after I record this video. And, you know, I think my video is a compliment to that kind of thing by telling you those guys might have it right, but, you know, here is what is the difference between a correct card evaluation and what we might end up seeing in the early draft data. And maybe even a lot of these disparities persist throughout the draft. You can still gain an edge by knowing how good Essence Scatter is in the last week of the format. Even when I was drafting Foundations on flashback a year and a half after we first got exposed to this set, I was finding Essence Scatter's 8th pick or whatever, and it's winning a game like a 2nd pick card in that format. So that often happens with a dual land, where once there's some fixed wisdom about what color pair is good, people start undervaluing other color pairs, and you can gain an edge in the draft by paying attention to specifically which dual land is winning higher than its last seen at. Would suggest it should. If you identify the underdrafted dual land, which is really easy to do in 17 lands, you just look at their card data and you look at the most winning dual land that is in a color pair that kind of surprises you. That can tell you often the gap between how much that color pair is winning and how much people think that color pair is winning. It's a very simple heuristic that you can sink your teeth into to get your mind around how the color pairs are actually performing in the format, especially relative to how good the conventional wisdom says that they are. The other thing is, and the reason that works, by the way, is because like the blue-red land is almost always going to go in the blue-red deck. If it's winning more than you think it should, that probably means the blue-red deck is better than you think it is. But the other thing is people do just also systematically undervalue mana fixing, especially multicolor, or rather colorless mana fixing that can fit into multiple different decks. The single most underdrafted card of the last 2 years, according to my analysis, was TCRI Building. This is just the simple blue-red gain land in Ninja Turtles. This card had a 60% win rate, which puts it on par with some of the biggest bombs in the format, like Leatherhead. Leatherhead was getting picked on average first or second pick. TCRI Building was a 6th pick card on average. So using the reasoning I just laid out, first of all, that tells you people were undervaluing blue-red. That archetype was getting underdrafted. There's your crystal clear, simple signal in the data. Number 2, it means that people were undervaluing the dual land, the fixing, just having good mana. In your blue-red deck, you'd much rather play 8 islands, 8 mountains, and a TCRI building than 9 and 8. You'll just win more games. So bump these common level dual lands up in your estimation and you'll win more. And especially once you start seeing in the data that one of them is winning a lot more than you expect, that is your awesome first huge piece of data on how the format is evolving. Here's just another example. Like in every set you can find one of these. Dismal Backwater, there was a huge gap between how good people thought blue-black was and how winning it was. By the way, this famously got ossified into the behavior of the quick draft bots. So people just recently were getting to like in the very high mythics by forcing blue-black in quick draft in foundations just like last week, because the bots systematically undervalued blue-black because they're modeled on real player behavior. And the players were undervaluing cards like Dismal Backwater. So you could get an advantage by just forcing blue-black when the bots are undervaluing it, or, you know, a year and a half ago when real humans are undervaluing it, and you would win more drafts. This is how you get an edge. I want to call out another type of colorless fixing other than the dual lands. So Potioner's Trove is a 3-mana artifact, tap to add 1 mana of any color, and then just a little bit extra. So this is a classic mana rock, just a little bit extra. Tap, you gain 2 life, activate if you've cast an instant or sorcery spell this turn. My fellow old people know that this is a variation on Manolith, and they've just been trying out Manoliths where you put a little bit extra something on them in recent sets. The results have been really varied. So Dragonstorm Globe was a defining enabler in its archetype, in its format, Tarkir Dragonstorm. This was the card that made the 5-color Dragons deck, which was one of the 2 dominant decks of the format. Another card, this was actually the most underdrafted card, I believe, in Tarkir Dragonstorm. This card made the other dominant deck in the archetype. It was like it was the most underdrafted card, certainly in the Mardu aggro deck. It's another colorless mana fixing card, although a little bit different from the Manolith, template that we see on the left there. An interesting example of this kind is Starting Column, one of the first Manolith variants where they tried just putting a little extra something on Manolith and seeing if it would be good in Limited. The win rate data on this card is not super impressive. It's low in the pick order and has a low average win rate. But the thing is, if you were in the know in that format, this was kind of the key that unlocked a really powerful and interesting archetype that was totally zagging in the format when everyone else zigged. When people were doing something really aggressive, Starting Column actually was a super cool payoff to just do something completely different in the format. So even if Potioner's Trove doesn't pop out in the data as an underrated card, if it is following in the footsteps of Starting Column, it could be a card that is a absolute key to an archetype that you wouldn't be able to play otherwise. So that's just one, role that this card might play in this set, something to keep an eye out for. I also want to liken it to Aang's Journey, which was like perfectly fine. It, just a colorless fixer, a little different from a Manolith, but kind of comparable. So often these kinds of cards are just okay. Sometimes they're bad. Sometimes they're way better than you expect. All right, are you ready for the number 1 card that I think I'm most confident will be underdrafted in Secrets of Strixhaven? As I reveal it, I want to say, if you like these kinds of data deep dives that give you an edge in Limited, do subscribe to my channel on YouTube. It's really easy to do. There is a link in the description below. I post videos like this all the time. I love to go deep on the data. Just the other day, I posted the second video there called I Doubled My Win Rate, where I talk about how I went from having a 35% win rate in Arena Directs pretty recently to a 75% win rate over my last 10 events. And I break down step by step the data that I use in order to achieve that. In fact, before every Arena Direct, I post a data deep dive where I show you not just what's good in Sealed in the format that the Arena Direct is about to give you the opportunity to win a box of, but also what is different between Sealed and Draft. So you might have time to go look at 17 lands and go sort in by sealed, game in hand win rate, and just see like, okay, these cards are winning a lot. But I actually go in and I download the draft data, I download the sealed data, I compare them to each other, and I pull out the outliers. And then I put that into a slideshow for you, and I show you number one uncommon that is the most better in sealed compared to in draft. So this protects you from the mistake that we're guarding against in this video today, which is undervaluing good cards. I also want to say what I'm doing today is half the story, and I'm going to give you the other half tomorrow. So right now I'm talking about the most undervalued cards. Tomorrow I'll tell you cards that tend to be the most overvalued. So if all you do is watch today's video, there's a bit of a selection bias where you see the cards that are undervalued, but hey, maybe those same cards have been overvalued sometimes in the same format, in different formats. I check to make sure that everything I'm saying is true, but you don't have the full picture. You don't have the complement. If I'm picking these cards a little bit more highly, what do I actually pick less highly to make room in my pick order, to move something down from the third place slot so that I can take Essence Scatter a third pick? What am I supposed to not be picking so high? And then after that, I do post a new draft every day with a focus on clearly explaining my decisions and getting better at Magic tomorrow than I am today, and bringing a community along with me in that improvement. So if you are a limited improver with a positive growth mindset, make sure to subscribe to the channel. Love to have you in the community. All right, time for the big number one reveal. This card is going to be underdrafted. If any card is underdrafted, it will be Follow the Lumerets. Look at all the text. Like, first of all, people are going to underdraft this card because they don't want to read this novel here. 1 and a green for a sorcery. Look at the top 4 cards of your library. You may reveal a creature or land card from among them and put it into your hand. If you gained life this turn, you may instead reveal 2 creature and or land cards from among them and put them into your hand. Put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. Okay, why do I think that this card is going to be underdrafted? First, I am actually serious that the cognitive load of understanding it gets in the way of actually figuring out how good it is. And people kind of, I certainly feel in my own mind a resistance to wading through all of that and just evaluating it when I could just take a 2/2 for 2 and, and be done with it. And we've just seen this cognitive bias over and over and over again. So here is the fourth most underdrafted card in the last 2 years. Malevolent Rumble, 1 and a green. Reveal the top 4 cards of your library. You may put a permanent card from among them into your hand. Put the rest into your graveyard. Make an 0/1 Eldrazi spawn that you can sacrifice to add a colorless. So this card was like almost bomb level Malevolent Rumble. It was unbelievable how much it was winning. Just such a ridiculously good card. The Eldrazi spawn was super relevant. And putting things in your graveyard also can be very relevant. So I'm not saying Follow the Lumerets is going to be a massive bomb like Malevolent Rumble kind of was, but I definitely think it's going to be very strong. And here's part of why I think so. The other time that we saw a card a lot like this was Cash Grab in Bloomburrow. This wasn't a mega bomb like Malevolent Rumble, but it was really, really, really strong for a common. 1 and a green, an instant. Okay, it's an instant, but mill 4 cards. You may put a permanent for among them milled this way into your hand. If you control a squirrel or return to squirrel this way, make a food. So this one also milled it. It was also an instant, and the extra thing that you get was a food. But what I saw from these 2 cards, Malevolent Rumble and Cash Grab, people were shocked by how much better these cards were than their expectations. And what I took from this is when you have 1 and a green, look at the top 4. You can get a creature or a land and then a little something extra. When you have something like that, I can look at the top 4, get the best permanent out of it, and then just a little something extra. That tends to be really, really, really good. It just aligns up really well in Contemporary Limited. So I'm very bullish on Follow the Lumerets. Look, it might be like a C+ card. I'm not saying this is your A+ first pick bomb. I'm just very confident this is like a C+ that people will treat like a C- or a B- that people will treat like a C. That's my claim. The caveat or the caution is we do sometimes see cards like this that are not very good. As adorable as the Beavers were, Commune with Beavers was terrible. Now, it's a much worse card, though. I mean, look at the top 3 cards. You're going to reveal an artifact or land and put them into your hand and put the rest on the bottom. It is weaker, like Follow the Lumerets, in being a sorcery and not putting things in the graveyard for graveyard synergies. But I think the most important thing is 3 is worse than 4. And the 1 mana rather than 2 mana doesn't matter that much in this context, I think. And the little artifact bonus is so much worse than the something extra that you get from Follow the Lumerets. What I get from Lumerets is amazing. If gaining life is easy enough that you can reliably do it, getting the 2 best cards from the top 4 is awesome. I can smooth my lands and also pick like a really strong creature to play. That just seems so good. This just seems like a good setup. So even though Commune with Beavers was bad, I think Follow the Lumerets is more like Cash Grab or Malevolent Rumble. Same thing with Cowabunga. Cowabunga is much closer than, and sorry if you're not a Ninja Turtler to have to tell you about Cowabunga. They printed this thing, it's a lot like the Beavers. So very similar to Commune with Beavers, and similarly a really bad card. So the difference is, look at this one does let you look at the top 4, but I think the really important difference is you don't get that something extra. The food really mattered on Cash Grab. The Eldrazi really mattered on Malevolent Rumble. This second card thing, I think if you can enable it, is going to really matter on Follow the Lumerets. So I think Follow the Lumerets is going to be underdrafted. I'm very confident. Whereas even though Cowabunga and Beavers were not good. And this is all predicting the future in a very difficult context. So very confident means like 70%. Okay, I want to give some honorable mentions. I didn't name any black or red cards, and I felt bad about that. This is going to sound so funny, but I really think Rearing Embermare has the characteristics of a card that could be underdrafted. Now, don't get me wrong. This kind of card is often bad. The 4/5 for 5 in red that just has like a little something. But it's often a lot better than people expect. So I just want to draw your attention to 2 parallels. Gorehorn Raider was one of the most underdrafted cards of the last few years. In Foundations, this card was extremely winning common, and it was going like 6th, 7th pick. Also, I remember the moment in Lost Caverns of Ixalan when everyone suddenly realized that Panicked Althasor is actually good and started prioritizing it way higher. Now, those were both really format dependent though, which is why I didn't include Rearing Embermare on the list. The Gorehorn Raider was good partly because red was just a little underdrafted in Foundations overall. And Panicked Althasor was good because LCI was all about really fast 1/1/1/2/2 flyers. And so having a 4/5 reach on turn 5 actually really mattered. But so Rearing Embermare has the characteristics of if red is bad or if red is overdrafted overall, it's not going to be good. But it could be one of these sleeper cards where if red just gets, slept on for a while and people are underdrafting red, then at a certain point, people are going to be like, I'm 12th picking Rearing Embermares and they keep winning me the game. And then everyone's going to get really, really bullish on this card. So keep an eye on Rearing Embermare. This could be some random D-level common and I'll look like a fool. But I'm just saying these 4/5s for 5, they have a way of sneaking up on you, or 4/4s for 5 in red. Okay, and then another honorable mention, Send in the Pest, 1 and a black for a sorcery. Each opponent discards a card. You make a 1/1 black and green pest with whenever this token attacks you, gain 1 life. So again, because I'm old, I have to say this is a variation on a just absolute classic, Ravenous Rats. So 1/1 for 1 and a black, your opponent has to discard a card, and this one has a little something extra. It's a multicolored pest, so when it attacks you, gain a life. Also, I'll note it matters that it's a sorcery in a Instants and Sorceries Matter format, right? The reason I didn't include this in my main list is these cards actually don't pop out like we've had in recent formats. Oh, a billion of these, Hectize, Nezumi Informant, blah, blah, blah. Like there's a Ravenous Rats variant in basically every set now at common. It's a really cool card and a staple of Magic design at this point. I didn't want to get into the conversation about when those are drafted appropriately, when they're overdrafted, when they're underdrafted, how good they are. That is a really, really deep conversation, not really what we're doing today. But if you're interested, Sam P of Rough Drafts has a fantastic episode on this, talking in Final Fantasy about the 3 2-mana commons, Black Mage's Rod, Undercity Dire Rats, and the Ravenous Rats variant, Hectize. These little common level effects that you get for 2 mana in black, they give rise to this kind of a beautiful illustration of when doing different things are good in Magic, depending on what your goal is with the game. So if that interests you, I'll link that excellent video in the description. And also Sam P did an entire episode about Starting Column, which I mentioned earlier. So I'll put that in the description too. I quickly want to talk about the feature of Send in the Pests that plays on a cognitive, I think a cognitive bias that makes us underdraft these kinds of cards sometimes. So this doesn't look like Hectize. You look at this and it says 1 and a black for a sorcery. It happens to make a creature along the way. That kind of card often does get underdrafted, at least early in the format, before people realize that you should be thinking of this as a 1/1 for 2 that makes someone discard a card. Send in the Pest is a creature that happens to be also a sorcery, effectively, right? You should think of it as at least as good as a creature with that same effect. So Mandibular Kite, this looks like a super clunky equipment, but it's actually a 1/1 for 1 flying and then some. It's actually 1/1 for 1 flying that's better than that. And people were treating it like it was an equipment with an equip cost of 4, right? And it got massively underdrafted. Again, one of the most underdrafted cards of the last few years. Another one, a little bit in a different category, but Side Quest Card Collection. The thing is, This card, flipping it into a 4/4 flyer, basically came for free. People were treating it as a 4-mana enchantment that doesn't affect the board, which is a bad category of card, but it basically ended up being a 4/4 flyer for 4 with a, you know, pseudo brainstorm or whatever. Not quite, but glossing a lot of details there. It was like a extremely strong card compared to how good it just looks the first time you scan it. Another card I would almost put in this category is Morkan Size. This was not underdrafted by the end of the format. People understood this card was incredibly strong. But imagine if this card, the thing about this card is it was so easy to make it like 4 2/2s. So imagine if this card instead looked like Sally Pride or something, like a 2/2 that comes in and makes a bunch of 2/2s when it enters, but it has like suspend 4 or something like that. That's kind of a similar flavor of card, similar effect, but it would look to people like a mega bomb if it were a 2/2 that makes a bunch of tokens and is a mythic rare and has suspend. Whereas the enchantment version of it at uncommon that looks like it doesn't affect the board, people sleep on that and they don't appreciate how strong it is. I think Send in the Past might play into this part of our brains. Last example before I summarize, Torment of Golem was like the best example of this in recent years. People looked at this soft 4-mana sorcery that makes someone discard something. This is like a F level unplayable card, but in fact, it's actually a 2/2 creature that when it enters, you get to choose and discard something. Very reminiscent of like Thoughtstalker Warlock, that one of the best uncommons in Bloomburrow. You know, this type of card, 2/2 in black at common or uncommon, you choose and make them discard a card, tends to be quite strong. So anyways, just something to think about when you look at Send in the Past. Make sure you're appreciating that it does put a creature on the board. You may get some advantage from people who just look at it and see a sorcery. All right, to recap, when you sit down and build your sealed pull at pre-release, or when you sit down for your first 2 drafts of this format, if you see an Essence Scatter, Banishing Betrayal, a Johnny's Response, some dual land, anything in the cycle of common level dual lands, or follow the Lumerets, make sure you're treating them appropriately. They're a little bit stronger, at least a little bit stronger than you probably think that they are. Tomorrow, tune in for the complement to this video, the most overdrafted cards, according to my predictions in Secrets of Strixhaven. I do want to give a little bit of a caveat that, you know, I'm trying to predict the future here. So I'm also going to do a follow-up video in a few weeks to say, did I get this right or was I woefully wrong? If every card I featured here has a average last seen at of 2 and a win rate like it's a 10th pick, then that would be a failure. And then I'll need to, you know, rethink my methods. But what I'm looking at is, are these cards picked a little bit lower than their win rate suggests that they should be? So once we have win rates and pick orders for the cards, I'll do that follow-up video. So make sure that you're subscribed to the channel to see tomorrow's video of the most overdrafted cards, and of course, my Secrets of Strixhaven drafts that I'll be doing as soon as it comes out on Arena next week. All right, until tomorrow, have tons of fun playing Magic, everyone. And especially have tons of fun at Strixhaven pre-release. And as always, don't be afraid to splash.